So this is episode 2 of My Life in Letters, and I'm really excited to have Doug Cunningham here, also known as Doug 1 from TMF Crew. Doug, thanks, man. Thanks for being here. How are you?
I'm good, man. Right on for reaching out to me on this, man.
Oh, man. You know, like, I decided there were, like, you know, a handful of people that I needed to interview. And for us, like, growing up in the Bay Area, you were just, like, so influential that it just made perfect sense. We'll just get right into it, and I'm really interested in people's very early experiences with type and with letters, just like even way before like graffiti. And so I guess I'm curious about that, like what your first interaction with lettering was, or type or typefaces or fonts. Can you talk about like really early years?
Yeah, man. Why don't I even start, kind of a little bit of background on what even led up to that,
Yeah.
So I think as a kid, I've drawn pretty much since I could hold a crayon. I was one of those kids that, didn't give that much of a shit about toys, but loved to draw. That kind of drawing cartoons, drawing all the, my favorite cartoons off the TV, the Yogi Bears, the Flintstones, all that stuff. And as, the years progressed, a new interest kind of kicked in. And, where I lived, it was, mostly heavily Latino neighborhood. It was, somewhat mixed, but mostly that. And in the late 70s, early 80s, all the kind of cholo, lowrider culture really just kicked in. It was everywhere. It was like the idea of like my neighbor having this sick-ass car with the hydraulics on it, and guys up the block working on their cars. And along with that, came a style of being, a style of the way people dressed, the way people carried themselves, and a style of writing. And
for those who don't know, you grew up in, was it specifically Daly City?
I grew up in Daly City, California, just right south of San Francisco. To be honest, man, I noticed the writing on the wall, but the first place that just kind of laid it out for me, I think it was, my dad had his best friend's younger brother had a tattoo shop. When I was a little boy, I'd spend a lot of time there, and he'd have magazines lying around, and because I was interested in what was going on with all the lowriders, I saw the first issue of Lowrider magazine. And it was the table of contents of that magazine that caught my eye. I was just like, shit, it's all laid out here. The alphabet, I could get the alphabet from this. I remember just copying those letters and putting them in an alphabetical order so that it was almost like now I have a code. I could write like this now. And as the years went on, I think that, other styles developed, and neighborhoods had their own styles, and other guys had their own styles. So it became, various styles of writing that people had. Some had kind of like a round, like cholo writing. Some had like these kind of, cut flat top, writing styles, along with the kind of admiration for, Old English and block letters. And block letters with, kind of very simplified 3Ds on them.
What year was that you grabbed that Lowrider magazine?
I want to say it was 1980.
And you said that like there was like a style of like sort of alphabet. What was that style? Was it Old English? Was it?
No, it was maybe, possibly even that was derived from an Old English, but it was a one-stroke lettering. It wasn't anything that had this depth or dimension or any thick and thinness to it. It was just a very stylized typeface that was pretty much, one thickness of line.
And it was sort of like, I don't know why I would say like Pachuco-inspired.
Of course, yeah.
Okay.
That's exactly. I'm sure that's, that's the origins of that,
Yeah. You just said a term that I didn't know. Was it flat top style? What did you call that?
Well, I don't know if that was a term or a way to describe it, but it was a style where the tops of the letters would be flattened, but the bottoms of the letters would round out.
Nice.
Sometimes they would be written on a slant, like every letter would have, a slanted angle to it.
So that tattoo shop had a pretty big influence, yeah? And just like that, and even outside of the shop, you were saying this sort of like cholo lifestyle.
Yeah, it was everywhere. I think it was a time where, neighborhoods were self-identifying, and their own neighborhood codes were popping up, and a lot of territorial pissing. There was territorial graffiti everywhere, and you saw the difference. If I lived right off Mission Street in Daly City, so if you traveled down Mission, you saw the writing jump every so many blocks to a new neighborhood that was claiming stake to their area.
Yeah. And so then I guess I'm curious what your understanding was of those territorial pissings. Like when you were a little boy, did someone explain it to you? Did you have an understanding?
Yeah, I think that somewhat. As much as a kid could have. You hang out with kids in your neighborhood. Those are your friends, your lifelong buddies, and you develop really early on, us versus them mentality.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just, that's just the way it was. As a young kid, I knew what was going to happen when I went to the Mission. I know we were going there, we're going to fight with kids, the kids are going to jump us, and that's just the way it's going to be, because that's what's going to happen to them when they came to our neighborhood. So that was part of, the game that you're in, and you accept it because you're in it.
Some of the questions that I had sent you, I had asked if, like, hip-hop had a role in your own personal development, and the more people I've been talking to about this, the more they're like, actually, it was more like punk, it was more like AC/DC, it was rock and roll. I'm curious, like, what kind of music might have been, sort of part of the soundtrack of your 1980.
It shifted, and I think early on, I lived in an area that all we listened to is soul music, funk music, and oldies. There was no other option. There wasn't a lot of white kids, so there wasn't a lot of rock and roll. But as I got older, that eventually came into play. Punk rock came into play. All these things. I'll kind of fast forward from the early 80s and up to the point where, I first was kind of introduced to what, eventually became the style of graffiti that I really understand today.
Mm-hmm.
And it was through other neighborhood kids, a kid who, these two kids, a kid who his, nickname or moniker was Shady, and another kid, Porky. And they were writing on the ground just with chalk, just writing. But they were copying Malcolm McLaren's Duck Rock album.
Oh, wow.
And I remember just kind of like I had no idea, what that was or what it meant, and I remember, when I was a kid growing up, graffiti was known as just hit up. Like, I saw his hit up, or I'm going to go hit that up, or somebody's hitting up. That was the term. And I remember him telling me, like, oh, no, this is like New York hit up. And it just opened my eyes to this idea, like, never even thought of, like, the idea of, like, what's going on in New York. I was young, I was a 12-year-old boy.
Yeah.
Your views of, the rest of the country, not, you don't even think about those things yet. And I remember that, along with that, just opened my eyes to just start seeing it everywhere. That was also a time when, the idea of hip-hop, mostly through breakdancing, was really making its way. Because I think that even prior to that, even in the early 80s, we were listening to, African Bambaataa and all that stuff, but I don't know if the term hip-hop was associated with that music for us yet.
Right. Yeah.
That was still under the funk catalog,
Yeah. What happened to Shady and Porky?
I don't know what happened to them eventually, but, I still have that memory of that moment,
Yeah. And so that was that still around 80 or so?
No, that was a few years, that was maybe early 83.
Okay.
Around 83, whenever that album came out, I'm sure you could look. I believe that was 83.
So let's just go into that then, because I'm super curious about your timeline. Like, I know when I can see pieces of yours where they're dated, but I wonder if you could tell me about that. And so then, I'm really curious. Like, did you do? Like, I just know my own personal experience doing, like, bubble letters, right? Like, in grade school in notebooks and things. And I don't even know where I was getting my influence. But what were your very early dabblings in graffiti?
There was a spot by where I grew up That was actually, it was the elementary school I went to. And it had become abandoned. It was abandoned for years.
Which one was it? Where'd you go?
It was called Crocker Elementary School.
Uh-huh.
And that kind of, eventually developed into a yard. It's a funny thing, because the first graffiti there, because there was a few other people simultaneously kind of, getting into this in my neighborhood. A few older kids that I remember. There's an older guy that, eventually I know he's spending life in prison now, but when he was younger, it was like somebody that people looked up to, and his nephew put his name up on the wall. It was a big, like, kind of, block letter that's starting to get out of the standard block form, starting to get a little more kind of fluid with the lettering, and it was a piece that said Uncle Marty. And I remember going up there, and I was like, fuck, man, these guys are painting big, they're filling it in really tight, And there was another guy who did something maybe a week later who was one of the early, really upriders of that time, is a guy who wrote Slime.
Slime?
Yeah, and he lived maybe a block away from the yard.
And that's Crocker Amazon, yeah?
Yeah, no, it's not Crocker Amazon, it's Crocker School. People have always kind of, like, mixed the two up. They're two distinctly different places.
Yeah, I did mix that up. And I always thought, okay, I was going to jump to, like, Crocker Amazon. I'm just curious, was it Eric Spy, that did the first piece at Crocker Amazon? Do you remember?
I don't remember, but, I wouldn't doubt that, because, that's close to his neighborhood.
Yeah. Okay, so anyway, back to Crocker. So Slime did that piece.
Slime did that piece, and then others just started following, man. I remember my first even attempt at a piece was this really tiny, in proportion to what other people had going on, little piece that I did with scrap pieces of paint. That it was the first piece that said Dougie, Dougie.
Nice.
And then I started kind of at that point, just because people I knew that would call me by name would just call me Dougie Boy. Like, hey, what's up, Dougie Boy? So I started writing Dougie Boy. And, breakdancing was kind of kicking in. This kid that I knew, well, not kid because he's a lot older than me, but this guy, Eric Santos, started a breakdancing crew that was, like, made up a lot of, like, younger neighborhood kids. He was almost like the big brother mentor to these kids. And he had started a crew called Santito's Crew. And he had asked me if I wanted to do a piece and that he would buy all the paint. So he picked up all this paint, all these colors, more paint than I had ever seen or had in my life, and asked me to do that. And I think that was the first kind of more ambitious piece that I had ever done. That I finally stepped it up to be, like, size-wise, the same scale as some of the bigger things that were going on there, full of colors and a character and those kind of things. And I think that was maybe early in 84.
Do you remember that paint? Do you remember what the brands of paint were that he gave you?
You know what? I don't, but I remember it started with the Z. Like Xylene or Xylite or Xy something.
Yeah. So this guy just gave you, like, a bunch of paint, and then...
Yeah, a bunch of paint, and then, it just kind of spawned from there. I started painting a lot more in that particular place.
Do you remember other guys that were painting at Crocker School? Do you remember other names?
At that time, it was Slime. Really, at the point, I can't remember any other names, but it was Slime was doing a lot there, and I was doing a lot there. Okay. We became the two that were painting everything, every inch of that place we could find.
And it was chill. Like, were you painting at night? Were you doing daytime pieces?
No, we were doing daytime pieces because, it's almost at that mindset. The place is abandoned,
Yeah.
I remember years later, police coming through and just, making an issue out of it. Because, it was, I guess you shouldn't be in an abandoned school. But I think that time, people didn't care about shit like that,
Yeah.
Part of the school was still there.
Oh, really?
So you could even run through the abandoned hallways. Like, there's, things were broken. Still there. Still projectors lying around. There was still stuff there left over from the 70s. But
wow.
It was just a mess, and it stayed that way for a long time. That place stayed this abandoned, destroyed lot, like just an eyesore for probably a good decade,
And did you paint it for that long? Or, like...
I think the last time I had painted there was probably in the late 80s.
Okay. But so you painted it for 5, 6 years, basically?
Yeah, yeah.
And I'm super curious about Dougie Boy, or like Dougie. Were there...
that didn't last too long.
Yeah, but Doug persisted, which is awesome. Like, I got caught by a bunch of SFPD painting a rooftop in Civic Center area, like in, I don't know, 95 or something, and they were like, "Oh, Adam." They're like, "And your real name is Adam?" And I remember this cop giving me this look like, "I'm so sorry for you that you couldn't be more creative and think of a better fucking name than your own name." Like, I'm really curious, like, was it always going to be Doug? Did you have other names that you played with for a while? Or?
I had small moments of playing with other names. Some of them I can't even remember. Maybe the one that I did the most pieces with besides Doug was Dement, D-M-E-N-T.
Mm-hmm.
But pretty much I stuck with that. Really, the three-letter D-U-G really, I think, stuck with me through playing video games. That, type in your high score,
Oh, nice. Nice. That's cool. And were video games a big part of your youth?
Yeah. I think everybody's youth at that time. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Maybe there was arcades, but there's also just the corner store. Everyone, it was that thing, right? You hang out at the corner store, everybody has their bikes outside. Bikes are constantly getting ripped off, and you're inside, oblivious because you're deep in a game,
Yeah. I'm just like, I'm trying to I'm making connections in my mind now to like a lot of the work that you guys are doing at Morning Breath, and I'm just like kind of like seeing if I can connect the dots between like old video games and some of your work now. Did video games have an influence on your early like artistic life?
I don't know if it was overtly a part of what I was doing, but definitely I think in the subconscious. I think that a style of graphics that still I gravitate towards, whether it's vintage kind of skateboard art or even cabinet art of video games, that strong inking quality.
Yeah.
That's still something that I look at, and I see things that feel that way, and I'm like, that's just what I like, what I gravitate towards.
Yeah, and some of those arcade games, man, those designers were sick, man, that were doing the outsides of those things. Super curious if someone's done any like documenting of all of that work, because it's some of it's really beautiful. Yeah,
I'm sure. At this point in life, I don't think there's a stone unturned.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. It's really interesting to think about that. What we used to call them liquor stores down the peninsula, but it was really
same with us.
Right.
It was a liquor store.
It was like
the equivalent of a bodega here.
Yeah, it was like a 7-Eleven, like a New York bodega, and there was always like one, maybe two games, right? I'm super curious about if you can talk a little bit about your part of Daly City. You mentioned it a little bit already, but I wonder if you can go a little more into detail just about that life, because I think a lot of us are kind of nostalgic for the way life was in the 80s. And so, and I personally, growing up in the Bay Area, like I just have really great memories of Daly City and San Francisco in the 80s. But I wonder if you can just talk a little bit more about that, like thinking about like at the store with the bikes and all the kids. Were there some other things that really stand out from those early days for you?
I think where I grew up in particular in Daly City was really just an extension of San Francisco. Mm-hmm. It's kind of, it's like I always say, I'm Daly City. Some people, I like to make, that don't understand Daly City. Sometimes I generalize like, I'm from Bay Area, San Francisco area or whatever. But really I grew up in Daly City, very close to the San Francisco borderline. If I crossed Mission Street, that would technically be San Francisco.
Yeah.
Because it's cut up in such a way that, like, I walk a block away from my house, and that's San Francisco.
Right.
I just lived on the side of the border that was Daly City.
Yeah.
So it was really where I grew up. It was just an extension of Outer Mission or Excelsior. The kind of vibe there was the same, very, working class area. Kids hung out at corner stores because they had video games. Mm-hmm. And again, that limited video games. There was also a few, kind of Filipino restaurants that would have video games and other things. It was like a weird time because I remember going into a Filipino bakery that had a pinball machine that you bet money on, and you could go in there and try to make some money. you know, and it's just those kind of things. I think the world wasn't so regulated, so people were doing all kinds of strange shit.
How would you bet on the pinball game?
I don't remember exactly, but I remember you played like $1 to play, and you had to get a certain score, a certain thing. It wasn't even really a pinball. It was almost like this wooden pinball game, and I can't remember it exactly. It's like my memory of it is really vague. But I knew that some kids were better than others and would get whatever it took to, you know, get paid out or double their dollar on that.
So that would be it. You put in $1, and if you win, you could make $2.
You wouldn't. You'd give it to the man there. You know, it's almost like you went in there to, like, kiddie gamble, you know?
Wow. Can you talk for people, especially, you know, New Yorkers who don't know, you mentioned that it was heavy Latino community, now you've mentioned that there were Filipinos. What are some of the other demographics in your community up there?
You know, I mean, I guess it was fairly diverse, but maybe unbalanced. Not, right where I live, not a lot of white, but heavily Latino, you know, black, and starting in the late 70s, the migration of Filipinos. You know, because that was, you know, like now you think of that area, you think of Daly City, it's like, oh, that's Filipino. I mean, that happened at some point, and that was the point when it changed.
So I guess I want to stay on Graph Timeline. Got off on that a little bit. So you did that first piece when Slime gave you all of that paint. That was around 84. So
well, no, it was a guy, Eric Santos.
Oh, sorry, Eric Santos. And so then, can you just walk us through a little bit more about the timeline, like how things went?
You know, I think that as my understanding or studying of graffiti grew, I mean, I started getting out of there more. Started getting out of just Daly City, and you know, I'd go with friends, you know, late night, and we'd have paint with us, and we'd go downtown. It's almost funny because we bypassed the Mission because of our issues with Mission kids, but would go directly downtown San Francisco. So I would find areas to paint a lot around, you know, off Market Street, down by, you know, areas like Fisherman's Wharf, some of the areas over by what's now like kind of the ballpark, you know?
Yeah.
Just like find these little outskirts and go out there and paint. And I think that's started opening our eyes up to that there's other kids doing this as well. Because we were at that time still locked in our world, you know? It was so new to us out there that we didn't know all these other people existed.
Yeah. But then you started going downtown. I'm really curious because, like, you know, I know you remember, like, early 90s, like, the scene in San Francisco had a lot to do with sort of all the pits, all the, like, abandoned building, sort of, like, foundations that were dug out. And so we were painting a lot of these, like, pits in San Francisco. In the mid-'80s, I guess, when this was happening, what were those spots like? Were they
know, parking lot walls,
yeah.
You know, just things. The pits weren't there, and it's funny because, I mean, the pit phenomenon really came about because of the 89 earthquake.
Right.
You know, and that just opened up all these buildings needed to be tore down, and it just opened up those spots.
Yeah, which was like, I mean, and it turned
into... You know, we were just, wherever we felt we could get away with something at night.
And who were you painting with? Who were the guys you were heading downtown with?
You know, a lot of it was my, you know, buddy, and it was like we started a crew, Reckless Riders, and at that time it was, you know, me, my buddy Eyes, Slime. You know, we were kind of the first, kind of main three of it. Mm-hmm. And then we built out a little bit more, but I think a lot of going out earlier was us, and then we had other friends. I had a friend who wrote Ralph. REL, and he would go to the city with me a lot. We'd just hop on the 14 Mission bus, you know. Mm-hmm. And that's also where, you know, we would start writing on the buses. Mm-hmm. And that was at a time when I don't remember any writing on the bus other than maybe some very generic or political graffiti. Mm-hmm. And we started seeing other kids write on the bus in response to us. And before we knew it, we had, like, you know, there was a good handful of people writing just on the 14.
Mm-hmm. Were they calling it bus hopping back then?
No, I don't know if that was a term yet, mm-hmm. But, you know, it was like, kind of made this jump. It was us, and then it was kids from the Mission. You know, and it was the first kids, really, that eventually became part of our crew. were three guys that wrote, Dazzle, Zinc, and Rex. And they had really, at that time, what we felt really kind of nice hand styles. We're like, fuck, these guys get it, you know?
Mm-hmm. They were from the Mission?
They were, yeah, I think they were from maybe like kind of Precita Park, like Army Mission area.
Mm-hmm. And so they got into Reckless Riders with you guys at the time?
Yeah, I think Eyes was, even to this day, I mean, but then he was, pretty social dude. He'd go out and he'd meet with people. And he's like, oh, fuck, I was on the bus today. I met those dudes, you know?
And you guys were using markers on the buses?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny that the marker at that time, the popular marker, out of our own ignorance of things, was the 44 Magnum.
So good.
Such a dry marker, but yeah.
But that was your go-to at the time, huh?
That was a go-to at the time.
So
but once we opened up into the city, I mean, everything started falling into place. The idea of like going out racking, going into stationery stores, quickly found, ultra wide markers and mini wide markers and pilots and Sakuras and all the tools of the trade. Were
you way into markers?
At that time, yeah, no doubt. I mean, into markers and into ink. It's like all these things that now people talk about, in nostalgic terms, like the Flowmaster ink and all that. I mean, that shit was available everywhere,
Yeah.
And it was untapped yet because people weren't hip to it. So we would just, get over on so much ink. And it's funny, man, I have some memories of that, meeting with kids in the Mission, other writers. I remember this kid, Dwarf, I was at his house and I was hooking him up with some Flowmaster ink, and I poured it into a shampoo bottle for him. And we're just talking, I realized that shit ate right through the bottle and just destroyed his floor.
That's awesome.
Not understanding the strength of those industrial grade inks.
Yeah. So I want to stay on Cruise a little bit because that's just like such a big part of this culture. So did Reckless Riders transform into TMF, or is it a whole different thing?
No, it somewhat transformed into TMF as we, a lot of, like, as you know, in graffiti in general, man, a lot of careers don't last long.
Yeah.
And a lot of guys just dropped off, It's just like we had other guys in our crew. We had, guys steal another dream before the dream that we all know of, And those guys stopped writing, and we started mixing it up with other crews. And eventually, this was in 85 is when we started TMF. And it was the first three people was, Cypher, Disc, Bizarro, and myself.
I've always been curious, are they Daly City dudes?
Cypher went to school in Daly City, but he grew up on, 16th and Cap Street.
Wow.
In the city.
Okay. I can only I had a good friend who lived at 16th and Cap, and in 91, that was such a sketchy block. I can only imagine how it was in the 80s.
It was really
Yo. Oh, shit.
Yeah, I mean, it had that, that lot of fucking transvestites and hookers.
Yeah. Especially because it was right off Mission. And so 85, you guys started TMF. My memory of all this, we really held you guys very, very high up, right? There was TMF, and then there was MPC for us, and then there was TDK. There were a handful of crews back then that we were you guys were legends. Who were the other crew? When you did TMF in 85, who else was really doing it the way you guys were, crew-wise?
I think that going back into RWs, I mean, our main kind of crew that we would, kind of line ourselves up against was probably a crew called KGB.
Ah. Yeah.
And, they were super talented dudes. Even at that time, guys like Guess, who are now TMF, were KGB at that time. You had all the crews in Berkeley. You had the task force. You had, that dude Fresh. You had all these people throughout the Bay Area, because even the mindset to go back, it's okay, I start out in Daly City, eventually make my way to the city, then, Oakland and Berkeley start becoming part of the picture.
Yeah.
It just opens and opens and opens up now till we have, the whole world on the internet with graffiti.
Yeah.
And, at that time, and TWS.
I was going to say, I'm trying to nail down Rigel Crayon for an interview for one of these podcasts, and I'm really interested in that TWS influence or whatever it was.
And that was also a little bit of, almost like in a weird way, I don't have the exact connection, but it was kind of a shift from that KGB. They became like the TWS, in my opinion, Maybe it's only because Guess was TWS early on as well.
Yeah, interesting. And so then can you just talk about how TMF kind of grew?
We started out with 3 guys. We started, pulling back into, people that hung around with Art Reckless Riders or were part of RW. Rise became now part of TMF. It all really, at first, just revolved around our high school.
Mm-hmm. And was it purely, I guess I want to get at, was there were you guys joining together, strength in numbers, because there was beef, because you couldn't just walk down Mission Street alone? Was it?
No, I mean, to go back into that, man, I'd say during the time of Reckless Riders, where a lot of that shit subsided. I mean, it was... My world opened up, and also started meeting kids from the Mission that wrote graffiti and started spending a lot of time in the Mission. And at first that was, very uncomfortable because a lot of people were like, oh, fuck that dude, he's a Daly City kid.
Mm-hmm.
And I would have to catch a lot of that shit, And eventually that just kind of, got left alone because the transition from, kind of hanging out with neighborhood gang kids to being graffiti opened the path and kind of put me out of that, out of that way of just being associated with that. I kind of, after a while, just like, oh, that guy's a graffiti guy.
Yeah.
It's not part of all the gang shit.
Yeah. And do you remember, when really, I mean, I know there was a lot of organized gang stuff from, probably 50s on, really, in the Bay Area. But do you remember when, Crips and Bloods became, part of the Mission? And if so, can you talk about how that affected the scene and how that affected just being a graffiti artist at the time?
I don't know if that ever really was a part of it. I think that, to be honest, I mean, something as silly as all that to me just became, popularized after that movie Colors.
Right.
And I don't know if the Crips and Bloods thing ever was a thing for, the difference is okay, within, kind of Latino gangs or Chicano gangs, you have, the Northerners, Southerners, Norteños, Sureños, and you have, it's color-coded as well. It's red and blue, but it's not a Crip and Blood thing. It just happens to, share the same color scheme.
Mm-hmm. So it never really affected what you were doing?
No, that was not an issue. I mean, if anybody up here were Crips and Bloods, it was maybe a few Samoan gangs.
Uh-huh. Did you guys have Sons of Samoa up there? SOS?
Yeah, there's SOS.
Yeah. So then TMF was formed in 85. Guys started kind of joining up. TMF never was really huge, right? As far as, sort of members?
No, it was always pretty tight-knit. I mean, I think that, it's a combination of, one, trying, get people down with us that we felt were talented, but also, I mean, we had a lot of people in our crew that weren't necessarily talented graffiti, but they were just, our friends. It was also more of just a tight-knit group of people.
And, did you ever have, out of that crew, was there, one guy or one person that you partnered with more than anyone else?
I mean, at different times, I think that there's times that me and Dean painted a lot. There's times that me and Bizarro painted a lot,
And what was that for you, having a partner? What was that like back then?
I don't know if I ever really thought of it, to be honest. I mean, I just kind of, it's just anybody from your crew at any moment is somebody you depend on to kind of catch your back there to paint with or to hang out with. So I never thought of it as kind of we're a dual team or, or us against the rest of the crew, we're killing it. I don't know if I ever, viewed any of it like that.
So you said that Dean was you guys went out on the regular, and Bizarro. I'm curious if there were ever other crews and other dudes that you were not tight-knit with, but that you were interested in maybe trying to collaborate with and do a production together, or go hang out and learn from each other over?
I mean, there's times that people cross, but offhand, I think that we stayed pretty much within our crew. I don't know if at that time it was so kind of like open, where everybody, just kind of like, oh, what's up? You want to paint? I think that, I think that the whole vibe of graffiti in Northern California at that time wasn't super friendly.
Right. Yeah. No, not at all. I mean, I just remember it was dangerous. Bus hopping was scary, man. 92, 93. I mean, you remember, it was like...
Well, like anything, I mean, it's almost like no different than, protesting or something, right? You're going to get a bunch of people that are there just to start shit.
Yeah.
So you have a lot of kids that aren't really riders, but it's an easy place for them to rob people. So they're going to hang out with other crews and just start robbing people.
And it's always funny, like I talk to New Yorkers and they don't understand how hood the Bay Area was and still is, and just how dangerous it could be, which I kind of find funny. Like, people have this opinion of the Bay Area that it's, really soft. I try to let them know. Actually, no, it was like pretty sketchy.
I mean, I think it's, it's just a different place. I think that being out here in New York for so many years now, I mean, I could see how that, could be looked at that way. I mean, because just from the outset, I mean, it's beautiful architecture in much of the places. And, it feels so clean. Yep. Especially now, where you're just like, I can't picture it. But also a lot of it has changed.
Oh, yeah.
You have all these people in the Mission now. I mean, that's a very different story in 1983, 84.
Yeah, and, I'll probably ask you in a few months or something to do another one of these interviews so we can just talk specifically about that. Because that's it's kind of driving me nuts every time I go back to the Bay and I go back to the city and I see how much it's changing. But I think that's a discussion for another day.
For sure.
I'm really interested in... TMF was created while were you in high school when you guys created that?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And where were you guys?
Jefferson High School.
You were at Jefferson, and so were most of the TMF guys all there together?
At that time, yeah.
Yeah, and so you went. I presume you graduated high school, and then.
No.
Okay. Oh, okay. Can you talk about that a little bit? I
mean, I was there for a year or two. That's as far as that went.
Okay, and then what happened? Then what'd you start doing?
Eventually I went to maybe did nothing for a while, but eventually went on to community college.
Mm-hmm. And you continued to paint, and TMF, really, I mean, from my vantage point, just got stronger and stronger and more kind of dynamic.
We continued painting. I mean, obviously, I think that in the late 90s, kind of, slowed down. Probably mid-90s on, just really slowed down. Everybody, it's like, now, like anything, I mean, you get older, and some people really just kind of stick to things and are really, steady with what they're doing. I think that all of us just kind of, life takes over, I guess.
Well, of course.
Have kids, you get married, all those things.
But so, I'm just going to jump back to 85, 86, whatever. How did you first meet up with Jim Pergoff? Because I think, if you want to talk, I'd love for you to talk a little bit about spray can art and just like how, I don't know, how that affected you personally.
Well, we had, member of TMF at the time, actually RWs again, saying that we were pulling from RWs. We had a guy in our crew who wrote Dizzy, who was grew up on 20th Street. I think 20th and Valencia, 20th and that Rondell Alley or whatever.
Okay.
And he had met Jim Pergoff somewhere and was talking to him about graffiti and showing him around. And one day he just showed up to my house in Daly City, or my parents' house in Daly City, with Jim Pergoff. And I was still pretty young. I think that was still RW times. And I don't know. I think that at that time I was like, that's cool. This dude's doing photos, but I was not very ever trustworthy of him.
Well, he must have been like, to you at the time, like an older white dude who you had no real connection to, right?
Yeah, no, I didn't. I think that, I don't know. I think that I remember in 85, he had put together a huge slideshow that was, showing a lot of stuff from New York at that time opened our eyes up to it. Because at that time, I mean, obviously, spray can art, subway art and, Style Wars has crossed our paths. And just like, it's just the beginnings of our understanding of how big this is, like what New York is really doing, you know?
Did you have a copy of Subway Art?
Yeah, I had a Xerox copy.
Nice. Yeah. Yeah. When did you get your hands on that? Do you remember?
Maybe 84-ish.
Mm-hmm. And was that something you just like poured over? Were you just fixed on that Xerox copy?
Yeah, I mean, I think anybody at that time was. Same with, like catching Style Wars on PBS, you know?
Yeah, exactly.
At that time, obviously there was no internet. There was no graffiti magazines except for, kind of the newsletter format that Phase 2 was putting out, that IGT.
Yeah. Did you get copies of those?
Yeah, we would send away and get copies of those.
Oh, wow. Okay.
I think that we have a few pieces in the last issue I think he put out. We had started sending a bunch of stuff to New York.
Nice. So back to spray can art. So Pergoff, did you know he was going to put you in there?
No, I didn't know anything about that. At that time, I think that while that was kind of coming together, I know that he had, close relationships with with Crayon and TWS.
Right.
And to be honest, at that time, one, we didn't really care for that crew, but also anything that Jim Pergoff was doing was just kind of like, fuck that dude. If he had, slideshow or something, we're kind of show up just to be disruptive, I think,
So was the popular opinion that like he was just some outsider trying to take something from you, or what were your thoughts on Pergoff?
We just felt like he doesn't know shit. Yeah. He kind of talks about graffiti like he's an expert, but yet he'd show a fucking piece that we thought was fucking pretty ugly or whack and, glorify it. We're just like,
okay,
nice picture, but he don't know what he's talking about. Why would he show something with such weak style?
But then when you first saw spray can art, what was your opinion of the book itself, like as a whole? Like, do you think he did graffiti justice when he put it out?
I guess at that time, I'm sure there's a lot of things missing. Like, I don't think anybody, and now I realize that you can't make everyone happy.
Sure.
And you're not going to be able to put something that captures everything, because something's going to be missing.
Yeah.
Even for us at that time, I mean, we had that spread that me and Slim did. Mm-hmm. But I don't think that captured what we were capable of doing at that time. I think he probably didn't care for us as much as maybe we didn't care for him at that time. Mm. And, just neglected to put our stuff in there other than that because it was more of a political message. Mm.
So then did it create any friction, like between you and any other crew members or any other crews?
No, I don't think so, man. I think that, you keep in mind, I mean, I'm saying all this right now, but at the time, what was I, 14 years old?
Yeah.
Think an adult gives a shit about a 14-year-old's opinion of them?
Yeah. Yeah. And what about now, like, 25 years later, more, whatever it's been now, I know a lot of people, when I say Doug, they're like, oh, from spray can art? I'm like, yeah, that Doug. Has it been a thing in your life, or is it just another thing? Just another thing. I don't think I ever really think much of it. Mm-hmm. I mean, again, that piece technically was not anything I ever loved. Mm-hmm. It was just more of a, served the purpose as a message at that time. Mm-hmm. I think you talked about Slime and Santos, and I'm really interested in mentorship. As in my opinion, I see mentoring in graffiti as almost completely dead. I think that like nowadays, all you need is Wi-Fi to have a mentor, and it's really sad that you can just go and look at 25 years of graffiti and not know anybody, and then put together a fresh style and go paint. I'm curious if you can talk just a little bit on mentorship or bringing guys up, and if you brought anyone up, and just that whole topic.
I think that as trying to be a mentor, I never had much success with it. You know, I had a lot of kids that were younger than me that I would show things to, but I also gravitated towards a lot of young people with problems. And I think that those problems got in the way of them ever really becoming something. You know, I think, you know, not that, I think maybe indirectly I affected a few people.
Oh, dude, I mean, I can say indirectly you probably affected a lot of people, man. A lot of people with your style, with your work. So directly, you're saying you didn't really have like one guy that you brought up?
No, I think that as a crew, we all helped each other. But in terms of like mentoring somebody from the outside, I mean, it's a lot of, you know, people at the time when I was younger that were younger than me that I'd show them things and sit down and talk about it a lot. They would be into it, but eventually, you know, they're off doing something else, or they're, you know, in jail, or they're gang banging, or they're doing something else, you know.
Did you ever get arrested for graph?
Yeah, I mean, I used, among other things. I mean, as a kid, I got in a fair amount of trouble.
But it never really followed you.
Yeah, you know, I mean, you got to grow up sometime. I think I got to a point in life where try not to get in trouble, you know?
Yeah, of course.
When you're younger, I mean, I just didn't care because, yeah, I mean, you know, I didn't think much of that. I don't know, like, what are they going to do about it? You know, lock me up? How long can you lock somebody up for some petty little shit? It was never really a worry.
And, you know, I never really, like, we always looked at TMF as, like, I mean, pioneers. But, like, I remember there being, I know you guys have had some beef with crews here and there, but, like, I feel like most people just, like, you know, respected TMF so much that we never saw you guys getting, like, crossed out and like, I guess I'm kind of asking about, like, what was, like, did you guys have beef? Was there, like...
I mean, there was moments. I mean, we had beef with, you know, TWS, but that was never physical. You know, it was just going over each other. You know, we had beef with NPC, and I mean, that maybe at times got a little bit physical, but even that, it's just in passing. You know, it's just like, whatever, who could, you know, puff their chest out the hardest, you know?
Right. And then, you know, there was also, like, a good amount of, like, battling on walls, which, you know, has just, like, kind of died. I mean, unless you're just, like, there's guys bombing now that are crossing each other out and doing fills. Can you talk a little bit about, like, any of those kind of, like, battles that maybe you guys, TMF, you know?
You know, I think that, you know, we painted maybe in a way that was competitive to other crews, but I don't know if we were ever really trying to kind of, you know, piece for piece go out and battle anybody. That whole concept to me is always kind of corny. I think that even when we had beef with TWS, I think that our view of it was less about trying to beat them in pieces and more just like, you know, like, we're not going to let them paint. We'll just go diss everything. And I know a lot of people could write that off as like, oh, you guys are just jealous. Why wouldn't you battle us? Because if you don't believe in the battling in the first place, why would it matter?
Yeah.
Our thing was just like, you know, more of just mean-spirited on that. Like, fuck, you know, they just spent all this time painting this. It's going down today.
You know, and then, so I had this question about, like, you know, like, bombing, painting freights, drawing and painting canvases. Like, you've done, like, so much. I remember, though, like, mid-90s, like, you guys had, like, a lot of really nice rooftops, like, along, like, the 101 in downtown San Francisco. Can you talk a little bit about, like, how much street bombing you were doing?
You know, I think the 90s was almost like, you know, a resurgence. I mean, at that time, I was, you know, I had a shop where I was selling, you know, a lot of, you know, markers and inks and caps. And I started meeting a lot of people from, you know, other places that were moving to San Francisco. And at that time, it was, you know, like KR and Shock, Reminisce, you know, even before Reminisce, because KR and Shock, and KR was with Enemy at that time.
Yeah.
And, you know, we started hanging out with them and with Barry and a few other people, and it just became part of, you know, our evenings, really. I mean, I don't think I thought much of it or how much you're going out bombing. To be honest, it was just part of social life. But you go out, we're going to go to bars, we're going to drink, and then after we leave the bars, like, you know, we all have ink and paint and things.
Yeah.
We're just going to go spend a few hours out there painting.
You know, a lot of people refer to that sort of, 91 to 98 as sort of being like a real like heyday, or, a real golden era of like San Francisco graffiti. Do you agree with that?
I think it was maybe that for some people, because it was a new era for them. There was an era that existed before them,
right. Yeah.
It was just a different time.
I just think that there was it seemed like, you're absolutely right. Like, I can imagine that early 80s era must have been so special because it was all so new, right?
Yeah, it was new. And someone I didn't mention that had a huge effect on us that I think affected a lot of city, eventually became of RW Crews back in the early 80s, was a writer by the name of Riff. Who was, when you did go into the city, he was maybe at that time one of the only ones that had throw-ups everywhere.
RIF?
Focused on that, where okay, this guy's doing something different. He's up with throw-ups everywhere.
Was that RIF, Riff?
RIF, and he also wrote Mr. A.
Mr. A. Wow, I never saw that. So that guy had a big influence on you guys?
Yeah, huge influence on us. And when we met him, we realized, we learned a lot. It was always a learning process. I think that even to this day, living in New York, it's helped me understand perspective of things, how big this city is, what all city really meant.
Right.
And, growing up in the Bay Area in San Francisco, it's your idea, you live in a smaller city and your overall idea is it's smaller.
Yeah.
A lot of guys wouldn't want to admit that because they think so highly of where they live. Mm-hmm. But, New York is huge. Yeah. The amount of people is fucking astronomical, you know?
Yeah.
And it's this thing, the whole, idea of, in the Bay Area, or people TMF Crew, or looking up to me, it's that's cool. But in the big scheme of things, I'm a fucking small drop in the bucket, man. And you realize your place when you're in New York and see the amount of talent in New York and the amount of people that were here way before me doing shit and that are super talented, And it's funny because I think the Bay Area, being a smaller city, also has a smaller pool of stars that they look up to.
Mm-hmm.
And they just kind of, it's like the city syndrome, right? Everybody, whatever city you're from, it's your city's the best. You got the best fucking sports teams, the best fucking food, you're the best place.
Mm-hmm.
But, a lot of times, man, you go outside of that, you realize there's a lot of fucking talent out there.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. And, I wonder if a lot of people have that opinion about that mid-90s era because so many people were just converging on the city from all over the country, really all over the world, and that was a really interesting thing for me, coming up during that time and just meeting people from Europe and New York and Philly, and I was it was wild, right? Everybody seemed to be coming to San Francisco.
Yeah, no doubt. It's funny because in a way it's that it was the first wave, and not to get on city politics or dynamics, but almost the first wave of gentrification comes through as artists. It's funny how many people I know that moved to San Francisco that complain oh man, it's so fucking expensive now. The Mission is a wrap. It's you didn't grow up there.
Yeah.
You're part of the fucking first wave of a fucking problem that put these people out.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you still have family in Daly City?
Yeah, my mom's still in the house that I grew up in.
That's awesome. That idea of these waves, it's really interesting, right? Because now, San Francisco is completely the buff. It's just kind of sparkly, and Oakland is just wrecked, which is so interesting because for so long you couldn't bomb in Oakland, and now no one's hitting San Francisco and everyone's out in the East Bay. So it's fascinating to me how things come in waves and in these shifts, and same with New York, I feel we're in an interesting wave right now, and maybe that's the emergence of all this street art. I don't know. Love to get your opinion on how much the internet really changed things, and then maybe if you can talk a little bit on just this influence of street art.
The internet, the good comes with the bad, right? You have access to more graffiti, more of anything than you ever really need. But going back to what you're saying earlier on, like nobody mentors anybody anymore. All this one-on-one connections are lost, you know, and also a deep caring for shit. I mean, life has just become swiped through it. You know, we're over bombarded with so much that how much capacity does anybody have to really give a shit about any of it after a while?
Yeah.
You know, it burns things out real quick. I think that a lot of the younger generation is not in much for the long term. They're just kind of like, you know, what's next? Because they're used to a world of swiping through life, you know?
Yeah, Snapchat culture, you know?
You know, it's here today, it's gone tomorrow so quickly, and so are their ideas and their feelings about things. And so in that sense, I think that, you know, life would be all right without it.
Oh, yeah.
You know?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I think a lot of people dream of that simplicity before the internet, you know? Like, I'm a fan, you know, of the internet, but, like, man, I see how it can dilute or kind of homogenize things, and this disposable culture is, it's pretty scary. And, you know, and you're a dad. You have a teenage son. So I think that you're probably seeing things on, like, with a whole different perspective, you know?
Well, you know, how I see it is that I just wonder what people are going to say back about this time in the future once they've had time to kind of truly analyze it. I mean, you know, I tell my kid, put that shit down sometimes, you know, or, you know, it's like this thing, like this attachment to social media and this phone. And I think that that's got to have an effect on people that they're not realizing at this moment.
Yeah, I tell that to my, let me be diplomatic here. I have a family member who I love a lot who has a son, and he's a teenager, and every single moment of his 17 years on this earth is documented on the internet. I mean, everything. And we don't know, man, how that's going to affect people. The jury's still out on this, you know, whether it's going to affect future employment or just whatever it might be, his own ego, like, we don't know, you know? And, like, I'm really protective of my daughter's image and her like, what she says. Like, I don't put any of it on social media, almost nothing, you know, because I want to give her an opportunity to make that choice for herself. And most people I meet, they don't give their kids that choice. They're just putting it out there, and it's a little, it can be. I'm concerned about it, you know. Sounds like you are too.
I mean, I feel you with that. I mean, it's definitely, you know, I guess we'll see. You know.
Yeah. And the flip side of it is that I want to kind of segue right into Morning Breath, because you've had a lot of success. And I think, I'd love to just hear, like, the story of Morning Breath, but also, if you can talk, and I'll remind you later, just, like, how you stay motivated, like, what is the sort of secret to the longevity of Morning Breath? So, can you talk about just sort of, like, what Morning Breath is and how it started?
Yeah, Morning Breath is, it's Jason Noto and myself, and we're pretty much a two-man design team, you know, in graphic design, illustration. I mean, we started as, just two guys that wanted to take on as much freelance work as we could. And it's always been pretty much commercial art. We've had some moments of doing things that were a little more personal, and that eventually led to, you know, an aesthetic that we do commercially, because people wanted, you know, that in that respect. But it's really, you know, we've been doing this for the past almost 15 years, and it's just a 15-year hustle. I think the motivation comes from knowing that you have to hustle. You have to. You know, it's nobody else is paying our bills.
Yeah. How'd you meet Jason?
Jason and I met Jason at Think Skateboards in the mid-'90s. We were both working as their graphic department. I was there actually replacing Mike Giant. Mm-hmm. As an illustrator, and Jason was the graphic designer there. And we hit it off. We meshed on a lot of, you know, our thoughts about design and art, and would collaborate a lot then, and that just continued.
Where was Think based when you were working there?
Think was in Hunters Point, San Francisco. Mm-hmm.
And then you guys so you started Morning Breath, you're saying 2000, 2001?
Yeah, 2002 to be exact. I think that I was, at that time in the late 90s, Jason ended up moving back to the East Coast. He's originally from New Jersey.
Mm.
And moved back here and eventually landed a position working at this company, The Drawing Board, which was the art department for Def Jam. And, started doing a lot of music packaging and eventually freelancing doing that. And that's kind of where I came in. I was, always in contact with him and kind of working together on, a few freelance projects, but it was kind of the right time to move into, an office together and take on as much music industry work as we could. And that was probably our first couple years.
So you were doing illustration, he was doing graphic design. What medium were you guys using? I mean, I presume he was on a computer for a lot of his graphic design work. Were you as well? Were you doing a lot of digital work?
I still draw everything pretty much by hand and, rely on the scanner. I know a lot of people use tablets to draw on. I draw pretty much ink on paper and scan it. And
then from that, you digitize it one way or another.
Exactly. Yeah, it all eventually becomes a final digital piece.
Yeah, and Morning Breath, man, like I'm always so impressed because you guys seem to walk this line where there will be like pure digital illustration work, and then the next post I see, you guys are doing this big, beautiful hand-painted mural, which is so good to see, because while I think there is like this like surge right now in hand paint, and we see that with like Sky High and Colossal and all these guys, it's still pretty niche, It's still a small group of people that can actually put the kind of work that you guys do on a wall. So what motivates that, staying with the hand? Is it nostalgia? Is it that that it's unique?
I think it's nostalgia. I think that it's both of our, kind of love and admiration for that quality that pre-computer had to offer. Just as much as I'm into kind of an older era of illustration, Jason has always been into that when it came to typography.
Mm.
It's like the trend of typography was like, now feels a little played out, but that was something that, Jason was exploring when we were at Think Skateboards before, like, I wasn't even thinking about those type of things,
Yeah.
Old signage and, the quality of hand-drawn type in an old advertisement.
And then you guys made the move to New York when?
Jay was here in the late 90s, but I made my way out here in 2002.
Mm-hmm. But you had already formed Morning Breath, so for a while there, you guys were working.
No, we had worked together continuously through the years at Think, but we didn't formally.
That's right.
Come up with the name for Morning Breath till 2002.
Okay, so you moved out. Did you move out partially to be closer to him for work? What was the move all about?
Yeah, that was it.
Okay.
Let's be in the same room working on the same projects.
And your wife was like, okay, let's do it. Let's go to New York.
Yeah. I think that we had just, I had just had a son.
Oh, so Sean was born in California.
Sean was born in San Francisco.
Uh-huh. So you had a baby, and you said, let's just do it.
Yeah, let's do it. I'm ready to make the leap, and more really for the reason of a career.
Mm-hmm. And it was a gamble that paid off. Right?
Yeah, to some extent. It's like anything. It has its ups and downs.
Yeah, well, like you said, it's a hustle. And on that note, do you foresee it always being a hustle? What do you think the future of Morning Breath is?
I think that it's in the foreseeable future, it's going to be a hustle. I think we live in a strange time right now. And besides all the political climate of it all, I think that the visual climate, going back to my views on, social media and how things are so disposable, I feel that it's also lessened the value of graphic work and graphic artists. I think there's a lot of young people out there that are designers, so there's a large pool to pull from, so the competition is big. But also, I think there's so many, and I know I sound very blaming of younger people, but they brought the value down. They sell their work for dirt cheap. They never understood that the generations before them worked hard to bring those prices up.
Yeah.
And I see so many kids that basically doing corporate work just for the exchange of exposure. shit's crazy.
Yeah, and those corporations, and I want to say one thing, I think it's perfectly okay to blame people, because I think that we all need to take responsibility for what's happening, so I think it's perfectly okay for you to do that. And on that level of that, and I'm glad that you brought up this corporate emergence, because a lot of people talk about these like culture vultures, they just like they kind of want to sink their claws into what we're doing, whether it's partially graffiti, whatever it might be. Like these corporations want a piece of it, and they will leverage that. They'll say, well, listen, I'm Mountain Dew, right? Or I'm Pepsi. You do a commercial for me where you're not going to get paid anything, but the exposure is going to be so worth it. And it's like, no, it's not true, Like, in a lot of ways, it's like, in so many ways, man, they need us more than we need them. But you're right, a kid will just give up all this great work for next to nothing. And it's hard. And, and I'm curious, when talking about, because I know you've done a lot of commercial work for some pretty established brands. Can you talk a little bit, because I know a lot of people I talk to are dealing with this right now, how to negotiate a proper fee, right? Thinking about all the people that came before you and what they've sacrificed. And also,
I think a lot of it is also educating yourself on what the market historically pays for things like that. And, it's a tricky thing when it comes to pricing, creative work. Because every piece you do is different, and it has different value to a different company.
Yeah.
If I do a small independent T-shirt graphic for a small company, it's my choice to charge them lower because I know the value that they're going to get in return. They're not going to get rich over it.
Right.
It's not going to be the same value that, say, the Mountain Dews will get from it.
Right.
So it's a weird thing. You charge them now 100 times more than you would have charged the small skate spot.
Yeah.
And some people will be like, well, that's not ethical. Like, it's the same amount of work. How come you charge them more and this person less? Because it's all based on your assumption of the value they get from it.
Yeah. More
than the work itself. It's like you could do something that, it only took you a day and you charge, $15,000 for.
Yeah.
And the reason being is that's what it's worth to them. That's right. How they're going to run with it.
Yeah. So can you talk a little bit about valuing your own work? How did you come to that point where since you threw out 15, let's just say, like, was it hard the first time you had to quote $15,000 for a gig? Or did you know the value of your work?
I think a lot of our prices are based on, a lot of times, what we've been offered.
Mm-hmm.
So you start learning, the more you work, it's like, because everybody works differently. Some people will tell you, this is our budget. Some people will ask you, like, how much do you want for this?
Yeah.
But after you've had enough people throw you their budget, you can kind of put it in a category of like, okay, this type of work.
Right.
This type of work for advertising campaign should be able to pay somewhere in this area.
And
if they don't, maybe it's not worth it to you. Sometimes, it's a tough thing because using that number, right? You tell somebody $15,000 and they say, well, we don't have, that wasn't our budget. We have $7,500.
Yeah.
You could take that and realize, okay, that's still only a day's work to do it. But you just sent a weird message.
Exactly.
That you're willing to accept half of what you originally thought you were worth.
Yeah.
So, I won't say that I have not done that, but I try to stay away from that. But sometimes reality kicks in.
Totally. You're like, man.
There's the ups and downs of running your business, and you sometimes, your bank account's the decision maker.
Yeah, absolutely. Your kid's high school tuition or whatever it's going to be, will dictate that. I'm curious if you've had any experiences like that recently. You don't have to get specific, or I should maybe frame it even larger than that. Does Morning Breath still come across that challenge where people...
Yeah, all the time. I think that in the past couple years, I think there's been a decline in what people are willing to offer you.
as in the numbers are getting lower. And I know that lettering plays like a big role in what you guys do. I appreciate that so much. And you mentioned that your partner was, deeply into graphic design, and you came with the illustration background. I think it's really interesting how much sign painting and lettering you guys still do, and we notice it and appreciate it. And, I wanted to also mention that I follow your Instagram like a lot of people do, and one of the things that like gets me super pumped up about your Instagram is all the black books that you fill. And so, I guess I'm just really curious if you could tell other people like what it is that keeps you motivated to go back and keep sketching letters and keep doing pieces and characters in your books.
It's really just kind of a need to stay up with it. Like I was saying, it's kind of about, being a student, and it's always learning a little bit something new that's out there, and new way of kind of, making your letters interact or trying something new. And I think also, as much as I go back and forth with my feelings of social media, I think sometimes there is a motivation of seeing what other people are doing. It almost brings out maybe a little bit of a competitive mindset.
Can you talk a little bit more about that?
I think that, I think we all have that, right? We all have a bar that we want to kind of, raise what we do to. And I think that, seeing what people have going on out there, there's some that forget it. I'd have to, do 3 black book pages a day to even start building the foundation needed to compete with some people out there.
Yeah.
But, I guess we all, you stay in your lane and you try to drive the best you can,
Yeah, I like that. And, we've been able to paint a couple walls not too long ago, and how about that? I know it's a little bit more difficult for some people to just get it all together, but that you still go out occasionally. I feel like I see you do a couple of pieces every year, a little bit more.
Yeah, a little bit. It's keeping your foot in the door a little bit. At this point, I would pretty much say, I'm retired in graffiti, but out of that nostalgia of it being such a part of my life for so many years, there is that feeling to want to paint once in a while, to continue drawing in black books, to, kind of look at graffiti, absorb graffiti, pay attention to it,
Mm-hmm. It's interesting you mentioned retirement, because I don't know if it's because of Instagram or just certain social media networks, but I feel like a lot of guys are coming back out of this sort of quote unquote retirement, And I think it's really interesting, man. And I think it's great, to be honest, because one of the reasons that this podcast means a lot to me right now is that the real original, the first generation of writers, they're passing away. They're all kind of pushing 60, maybe even older. Some of them, health and lifestyle has not really been that positive, so they're dying, right? And we're losing these guys, which is again one of the reasons I want to have this podcast, to start to document these stories. But I wonder if that age hits a guy and he goes, wait, I still have things to do on the wall. I still have things to spray with these cans. Have you been noticing that? Older guys?
No doubt. I love seeing that. I love seeing all these old-timers that were generations ahead of us, doing their thing and showing their past, their history. As a young kid, I could only speak about my generation, and maybe a few guys my neighborhood that were older that have, kind of similarities to those guys, but on a different coast.
Yeah.
But when I see that generation, it's it reminds me of the older people I remember seeing as a kid. And, even though they were doing 2 different things, there's an attitude that people had, a way of being. It was a different time.
Yeah.
Different time, and it's interesting to see that. It's interesting to see that they're still, making these attempts to draw on black books, to paint, because it's they're not about evolving to the latest styles. They're keeping in what they always did.
Yeah.
And there's something to appreciate about that foundation, that simplicity of graffiti.
Yeah, man.
Those hand styles that don't have all the the bells and whistles of shit that people are doing now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. but that there's still like a purity to it, you know, like the essence is there, and I appreciate that.
No doubt. I mean, we wouldn't be where we're at without that.
Yeah. And, you know,
I think, to be honest, some people have strayed too far away, and it would do a lot of people good to, you know, look at what was done by that generation and respect it.
Yeah. Can you elaborate on that a little bit more, or give an example?
You know, I'm just more, I guess it's an opinion, but, you know, I'm a traditionalist. Sometimes things stray so far away, and I get it, the need to want to be noticed with, you know, something original, but I also think that a big part of graffiti is tradition.
Yeah.
You know, and you stray too far away, it's no longer within the lines of traditional graffiti. It's its own thing, and I personally don't always appreciate that. I'm sure some people are like, oh, that's great, that they're pushing the boundaries, but to me it becomes its own thing. And I guess it could be, you know, looked at, oh, that's great for being its own thing, but it loses, you know, I guess the essence of what has always appealed to me in graffiti.
Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting, man, and well put. Listen, Doug, this has been awesome. I really appreciate you taking the time to do this. I think at this point, I just want to wrap it up by having maybe you tell us, like, where we can find you, where we can contact you, how we can hire you to buy your work. Can you just give us a little bit of a rundown of contact?
You know, the best way on a professional level, man, to check us out is on Instagram at Morning Breath Inc., Morning Breath INC. Mm-hmm. And on the web, it's morningbreathinc.com. Email's there, everything is there.
All right. And anything like in the works, publicly or privately, like big shows or big projects you want to mention real quick?
You know, I mean, the thing that is, I guess, been in our lap for way too long, but it should be out for, I believe, probably by possibly a summer release, is putting together a book with HarperCollins, and it's Morning Breath. Pretty much 15 years of our design work.
Oh, wow.
And the book is titled By the Skin of Our Teeth.
Oh, that's awesome, man. How long has that been in the works?
You know, we should have had it handed over about a year ago, but we've had it on our plate for about the past, 2 years.
Okay. Wow, that's exciting, dude. Can't wait to see that.
Yeah, so we just about wrapped it up. We finished, had a bunch of people writing for us, and, we got all the layouts in, so now it's just going over things with a fine-tooth comb, and should be wrapping up shortly.
Dope. Well, we'll be keeping an eye out for it. Thanks again, Doug. Great talking to you.
Right on, man. I'll talk to you soon.
All right, brother.